So my topic is farmers owning the value chain. Can it be done? And exploring the pros and cons of scaling. So before starting, I just really wanted to make an acknowledgement to the Nuffield scholars, the past ones and the present, especially the ones that helped me through my learnings. This is from New Zealand, and it's just amazing the fraternity that comes from Nuffield. So I'm honored to be a part of it, and I'm also honored to contribute to it. And also I'd like to thank Blake. I'm tearing up. Once a year, just checking in, saying, how's it going? Because it's good. And then also want to thank the family. So my partner and kids, of course, the kids complained as we're driving to BC, thinking 12-hour drive, why are we doing this? And then we get to the apple orchard and they're picking the fresh produce and learning to love it. So it's a beautiful thing to get them into the agriculture side of things. And also to the people that have helped me out along the way. So all the people that I interviewed, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have this knowledge. And it's also them who've inspired me to better my company and at the same time, inspire more people themselves. So just a quick thing about myself and why I picked the topic. So I'm a first generation farmer. I don't come from a farming background, but it's always been a calling to me. So agriculture has always been something that I've wanted to do. And so when I graduated high school, I went to Olds College. And when I was there, which is an agriculture horticulture college, so I took a horticulture program. And when I was there was two different kinds of people to the classroom. There was a first generation, and then there was a multi-generation, the people that had 300-acre tree farms, or the greenhouse operation, the sod farm. And then there's the rest of us, the dreamers. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be expensive. How am I going to do this? So since then, I've got a couple trade tickets, and now I work in the trades. So I work as a kind of like a project coordinator, and that's really what's afforded me to start this off. And this is also something that is what got me to my topic of processing. That in 2019, when I applied for this, my HasCap orchard. So I'm a HasCap fruit grower. So I actually just came up with my 10-year anniversary of buying land in 2014. And so I have a HasCap orchard just north of Edmonton. And in 2019 was my first harvest. And at that point, because HasCaps were like the greatest thing ever, the whole thought process was, because it's the best fruit that we can grow in North America, that this big novelty trek with so many zeros would be coming up, and I'd be able to just sell my crop and then be good. But the reality is nobody knows what it is. It might be the best thing ever, but until you educate, you have no sales. So I've had to switch from wholesale model to now farmers market, selling into 12 different retailers with a retail line, one that I'm expanding, and also farmers markets for the educational. Oh, and the UPIC side. So it's really expanded. So I thought, well, if I can learn from Nuffield how to better my company, this is also something I could pass on to other people. So to me, this really encapsulates where our kind of industry is. So it's from 1941, Farmers and the Future. So 2 generations ago, the average farm worker could manage 22 acres of improved land. Today, with the help of science, he can handle 79 acres. More than twice as strong as our forefathers, he can say without a fear of complacency, we are winning out in the struggles against nature. So I think what's beautiful about this is, and at the same time, when they published this in 1941, the average farm size was 286 acres. So now in Alberta alone, if you get rid of the 80-acre farms, it's 2,600 acres is the average farm in Alberta. So with the changing times, we have to be more inventive, because as a first-generation farmer that doesn't have this experience, it just seems very competitive. And the barriers to entry to get into farming, to be in the commodity market, honestly, I think are impossible. Unless you're multi-generational, which I'm proud of those people, it's just not easy as a first gen. So the problem, can you own the value chain, and should you own the value chain? So if we look at these 2 different families, you think that they look quite similar, which they are. But the difference is the first generation and the multi-generation farmer. So I'm just going to give the kind of research method or methods behind this, so the metrics of first generation farmers, and then multi-generation, and then I also color code them, of green being easy and then red being a pain point. So first generation farmers they have their money restrained and also knowledge restrained. Well, a multi-generational farmer they don't have to worry about money in the same manner, as well as they have this knowledge transfer. So they have this succession from generation to generation. So actually they don't worry about production like a first generation farmer does. A first generation farmer really has to focus on farming. Sounds simple in this community that we're talking right now. It makes a lot of sense. But who's a multi-generational farmer? Hands up. Anyone? Nice. I love it. You guys are the knowledge keepers. Who are the first generation farmers? Any? Yeah, my people. So it's really amazing about the first and multi-generational farmers is when they own the value chain, they all have post-secondary education. There was not one family member or team that I met that didn't have post-secondary education. And it wasn't just post-secondary, like it didn't have to be both of them. It could be a lot of times it was someone that farmed previously, the multi-generation, and a first-generation farmer. So I thought to myself, well, it kind of, if you put the two together, okay, my AI is not as good as the other AI, but that's what it came up as super gen farmer. So to go and define what the difference between a hobby and a micro farm is. So a hobby farm is someone that's kind of just doing it for fun. Micro farmers are really trying to get to the small and medium scale size, and they're really putting their life into it. So 1 to 3 employees, enough to get by really. Small is 2 to 20 employees. Small farm scaling is in mind. And then the medium, which is 20 to 50, and typically they have a processing manager. So going over the 7 layers of farming or the value chain. And what's beautiful about this is that these aren't dependent on agriculture, they're industry. So I think a lot of people can really understand. And for the farmers in the crowd or the people that are doing the multi-generational side of things, or the value chain, think where you are on this. Because on average, a person can only do 2 to 3 of these by themselves, but you need to own all of them. So who's going to be doing this? And that's why it was so beautiful to see so many of the partners in pairs, and also with the larger medium scale families where they had a whole family involved. So think which one you sit, where you sit at. So production, that's the fun part. That's the farming part. In many ways, this is why we got into farming what we love the most, but it's just as equal to those other 6 pieces. So first generation farmers, this is what they love, but quickly they realize, and I can speak to this, the management takes over, and this is where all your energy goes towards the management, and you fall apart and fall away from what you love. Probably same thing with the multi-generational farmers. And so what it is so 50% they don't own the land for the hobby farmers. This is really hard for them. As a comparison, if you don't own land, so a lot of them had to buy land, if you're going a comparison between a Farm Credit Canada or a BDC, so farming bank versus non-farming bank, the exact same purchase, your interest rates are significantly different. 7.25 with FCC, fixed year mortgage, or 9.8. So over just 1 year, that's $3,298 as an entry point someone that doesn't own land has to face. And typically when you're in production, everything's by hand. So it's just you're harder to scale. And then with the small people, it's 50-50 of first and multi-gen. They typically have staff, more equipment. Land is not as much of an issue. And then with the medium person, they've really dialed in their operation. The previous generations have been very successful with this. And this is also something that's beautiful with succession. So we have a big problem from what I hear, and I'd love to have my kids take over. So I'll get there one day, but succession is very difficult in agriculture. And this is something that when you get into this value add, succession becomes potentially a lot easier because the older generation can own a portion of the value chain, and then the new generation could take over the next step. As well as it was very beautiful and interesting to see that traditional agriculture had good success in owning the value chain, but horticulture was really what dominated the space. And then the harvesting side, when you own the value chain, you can harvest to the way you want it to be. And so with hobby, it's big equipment costs, so it's typically by hand. With a small scale person, they have their own equipment, it's typically used. And with the medium scale, and I'll get a bit more to this, is that they have the equipment and it's been paid off sometimes generations before in the past. So primary processing, so this is where it really starts to change from farming into the value add. And this is something that it's really hard, especially as a small guy, because the small, like the hobby farms, the micro farms, they actually bypass this. They don't have the ability for storage. They just jump right into it. So they have a really hectic season. Then with a small scale producer, like myself, that you have some storage on farm, but it's really hard to find other storage because our systems are set up for the really large guy, or at least it is for myself in Alberta and also quite a few of the Americans that I talked with. But when you get to the medium size, they're so savvy with their money because they've perfected the system. So they keep everything in-house. And then with that, they also see the potential to rent things out. So the value add, this is where things get quite murky or difficult with paperwork. And this is where it really starts to differentiate between them all. So typically a hobby farm is the make it, bake it, or grow it. So they really focus on the farmer's market side. They typically own one piece of equipment that makes your final product. Everything else is by hand. And then a lot of times they have their personal kitchen, whether it be certified or not. It really depends on who their end customer is. Small scale, you're stuck in the middle, a rock and a hard place because you're trying to get to the big guys where you can sell volume, but you don't have the money to support the certifications that you might potentially need. So you have one piece of equipment, but at the same time, you've got to do a lot of manual labor. You also really have to think about where your distance is, which is distribution, I'll get into it a bit more. Food safety really becomes an issue. And whether you're, it's $2,000 for organic cert, $2,000 for GAP certification, $2,000 for B Corp. These are what I have. Whether I have $1,000 crop or I have a $100,000 crop, I still have to pay those expenses. So the middle guy is really tough with finding those places. The medium scale, they have no issue because they have, it's easier to move those costs across. And then sales and marketing. So the one is, you have to start on the left where you're doing the social side of things, one-on-one. And on the right this is my sales model. And you could see you really need to know where things are going and where all your efforts go. Should have more time for that slide. So sales and marketing is typically one-on-one. The small guy's kind of stuck in the middle because they have to have a person involved, typically a spouse, and its time management really becomes key. I know one farmer I talked with, he does 30 CSA boxes a week, and just all those touch points just killed him. But for him, that's what he loved. He's a salesperson by nature, and so it made it easy for him. And then the medium person, they were just dialed in. They had a designated person, and they were really tracking the return on investment and seeing where it went. Distribution is, you just lose a lot of opportunity on this because if you're a farm and you're far away, you have to spend a lot of time and effort to get your product to market. And if you're close, you have to spend more money on land. So I'd say it's hard for absolutely everybody. And I'll get to a price comparison of why it becomes so different when you think of the cost of sales. One farmer I talked with, they did 2 deliveries a week. It was Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and it tied up one of the owners for an entire day, dropping off a couple $1,000s worth of produce. So it sounds great to sell into high-end restaurants, but if you don't have those margins, like we were talking about with the tomatoes, it really becomes not cost feasible or profit feasible. Then paperwork. Oh, I wish we could talk about this for a long time. You guys would just love it. But this is what really makes or breaks a lot of people, a lot of companies. The hobby guys, they do everything to get away from it in many ways. Then the small scale, again, stuck in the middle because they're trying to get these standard operating procedures and certifications, but they don't have the scale to get to it. And then the medium, they have a designated person. So let's do a comparison. Okay, good, it works. So we're going to set the standard. So what we're doing is we're comparing micro scale farms, so the person that sells at farmers markets, to a medium scale. So what we're doing is we're selling salsa here. And they're selling salsa, they're making a minimum of $45,000 a year. The end price is $10 per jar, and each jar is 500 mils. So you can see the micro scale farm, they're smaller, they're going to have more costs. It's $5.25 a jar compared to the medium where they have less, cost less, so $4.60. But then when you think of their marketplaces, and this is the fallacy of retail, which I think people really need to think of, and I'll get to in a bit. Well, now you got 25% brokerage costs and 30% retail margins. In the States, it's even more. So you're actually looking at 25 and 30 to 40%. So now that profit for that jar of jam for the little guy, $4.75. For the retail sales, that's 65 cents. That's only a 12.4% profit margin. That's insane. So if we put the extra cost to it, so the equipment costs and trying to make your wage, the small guy has to sell 9,500 jars. Not too bad, not too manageable. The big dog, 81,000. That's a huge difference to make the same amount of money for that 45,000. And if you think of it as comparison, for the little guy, that's about 5,000 kilos of produce, or 40,000 for the big guy. But if you think of it, that's 0.6 of an acre for the little guy, or it's 5.1 acres for the big guy. That's 851% larger. So what does this mean? So yes, you can own the value chain and dream of scaling. This is what you need to know. Good, I got lots of time. So key takeaways. The stuff that I highlighted are the things that I really highlight in my paper. So if you guys want to dive into this, I mean, a small little presentation really doesn't cover a 60-page presentation. And a conversation with me, and this is what I would love to do, is get consulting, not to make money, but just to pass the knowledge. Just give me a call. I just love talking about this stuff. So for a personal side of things, realize your glass ceiling. This was a big thing for the small guy, for the micro, because they were so focused on just trying to get their produce out and make a living that they couldn't even perceive scaling. All of them that I talked with had post-secondary education, previous careers, so they'd understand what it's like to be management. Most of them were upper middle management kind of a thing, but they couldn't perceive getting even staff because they were so focused on the granular. And make sure you know your knowledge and your skills to scale. So when it comes to those 7 layers, well, where are you? And what can you focus on? Because if I personally loathe sailing. So my partner, Adele, she really helps me with that. My cousin also does sales. So really focusing on the things that I'm good at. Keep your strength strong. Triathlon thing. But then also timing is everything. So looking through a Forbes study that it was 48% of businesses are successful more than the idea, more than capital input, and more than what your product is. So if you don't have your timing, you don't know, it might not work. And then the grind is real. You're going to be putting in that time. It might sound easy, but I talked with one medium scale farmer that sold into retail, beautiful BC orchard. They hate it. They want to pull back on it, but they're so invested in equipment nowadays that that's what they have to do. And then farm diversity. So the farm income. This is really, again, 47.7% of farmers have off-farm income. This still holds true even when you're trying to own the value chain, because that's your backup. So, and within the company. So the big thing is know your vision and know your audience. So the people that were successful, they were just straight shot of focus. It was beautiful that everything that they did had an intention and they knew their place. And the partner-spouse relationship, they knew out of those 7 levels or layers which one was doing what, and they didn't cross streams. A lot of it was really beautiful because they didn't even know one person didn't even know about the farming. You got it covered, I'm good. I'm focusing on marketing and sales.